It began with a whisper, a single, almost imperceptible murmur that traveled through the corridors of one of the world's most scrutinized residences. Whispers can be dangerous. They grow. They metastasize into rumors. And sometimes, they become undeniable truths. But this was not just any rumor. This was a statement that shook the royal world to its very core. Prince William, the future King of England, had received a diagnosis, a tragic, life-altering revelation that no one, not even the closest members of the royal family, could have fully anticipated. And sitting beside him, carrying the weight of unimaginable fear and responsibility, was Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge, poised in public elegance but crumbling in private agony. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine being Kate in that moment. Publicly composed, flawlessly polished for the cameras, greeting crowds with a serene smile, all while inside, her heart is shattering. Can you even picture it? Facing the unthinkable, yet still needing to uphold appearances for a global audience. The Duchess had a decision to make, one that would not only affect her family but the monarchy itself. And the timing could not have been worse. From the very beginning, Kate had been a figure of resilience, grace, and meticulous diplomacy. She understood the invisible rules of royal life better than most. Every gesture, every glance, every word. Observed, analyzed, scrutinized. But no rulebook prepared her for this. No amount of royal etiquette could shield her from the emotional storm that was about to engulf her life. The diagnosis didn't just threaten Prince William's health. It threatened their entire world, their family, and the delicate balance between duty and personal devotion. And yet, despite the impending tragedy, Kate did what she always does. She maintained a calm front. But behind closed doors, there were tears, whispered fears, sleepless nights, and a gnawing question that haunted her every thought. How do you say goodbye to someone who is still here, but whose life is irreversibly changed? That question would become her private torment, a shadow that stretched over every decision, every conversation, and every appearance she made. It's tempting to imagine this as just another tabloid story, royal drama, a health scare, palace intrigue. But this is different. This is personal, profound, and raw. The public sees the photo ops, the carefully staged appearances, the rehearsed smiles. But they do not see the private world. The bedrooms where whispered fears float like ghosts, the corridors where aides carry urgent messages, the drawing rooms where a duchess is forced to make impossible decisions in silence. And make no mistake, the implications of this diagnosis go far beyond the personal. Every move Kate makes is watched, dissected, and interpreted. The monarchy is not just a family. It is a global institution. Every ripple in their private lives becomes a wave that reaches millions. The world watches for signals, for cracks, for signs that the seemingly perfect royal image might be faltering. And in this instance, the stakes could not be higher. From the moment the diagnosis was delivered, the atmosphere in the palace shifted. A hush fell over conversations that once flowed freely. Meetings that were once routine were now tense, filled with careful word choice and unspoken fears. Kate had to navigate this new reality with all the composure and strategic thinking she could muster. She had to manage William's health, the emotional needs of their children, and the relentless gaze of a global audience that expects the royal family to be flawless, even in the face of devastating news. The Duchess's role, historically defined by poise and support, suddenly expanded into something far more complicated. She had to become a pillar of strength, a shield against public scrutiny, and a source of emotional stability for a husband who was grappling with his own fears. And yet, in the solitude of her private quarters, Kate faced a raw, human vulnerability that the world would never see: doubt. Could she really handle this? Could she carry the weight of this tragedy with the dignity the royal family demands? The stakes were intensified by the unrelenting nature of media scrutiny. Every word, every gesture, every public appearance would now be analyzed for signs of strain, of fear, of despair. Could the Duchess maintain the delicate balance between showing compassion and preserving royal dignity? How would she navigate the fine line between private grief and public performance? These were questions with no easy answers, and the pressure was suffocating. And as if that weren't enough, The diagnosis was not just a private family crisis. It was a story with ripples reaching far beyond the palace walls. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with speculation. Headlines screamed for attention. Pundits debated every possible outcome. But what few realized was that the story being reported was only a fraction of the truth. The real drama, the most disturbing elements, were hidden behind palace doors, known only to a handful of people, Kate being the most central among them. Kate's predicament was a crucible of emotion and responsibility. On one hand, she had to provide unwavering support to her husband, maintain stability for her children, and uphold the image of the royal family. On the other hand, she was processing her own grief, fear, and uncertainty. Every decision was loaded with consequence. Every move, even a simple gesture of affection, was weighed and considered for its broader impact. Imagine living life in that pressure cooker where every heartbeat is measured against public expectation and private anguish. And yet, despite the crushing weight of this reality, Kate showed extraordinary resilience. She adapted, maneuvered, and strategized, drawing on reserves of strength few could comprehend. She had to, because failure was not an option. The monarchy cannot afford collapse, even when human lives are at stake. And the cruel irony is that in facing this personal tragedy, Kate had to maintain an almost impossible facade of perfection, even as the world she knew began to fracture. It's tempting to ask, what would you do in her position? Could you smile for the cameras while your heart breaks in private? Could you manage a household, uphold tradition, and simultaneously navigate a life-altering diagnosis that threatens the one you love? These are questions that ordinary people never have to confront. But for Kate Middleton, they became her daily reality, a relentless test of endurance, courage, and emotional intelligence. As the hours turned into days, and the days into weeks, the pressures mounted. The diagnosis, while devastating, also revealed fractures within the palace itself, hidden tensions, unspoken disagreements, and conflicting priorities. Kate was thrust into a web of intrigue she had never anticipated, where personal grief and political maneuvering intersected in ways that were both shocking and disturbing. Every conversation could carry consequences. Every decision could become a headline, and every moment of vulnerability could be exploited. The true weight of Kate's ordeal lies not only in the diagnosis itself, but in the cascading effects it unleashed. Relationships were tested, loyalties questioned, and the very essence of trust became fragile. The Duchess had to navigate all of this while remaining publicly composed, ensuring that her family appeared united, strong, and unaffected by the storm raging behind palace walls. The irony is cruel. The more she protected the public image of her family, the more isolated she became in her private struggle. And here's the chilling truth. The diagnosis was only the beginning. The real story, the parts that are hidden from the world, the decisions and confrontations that took place in the quiet rooms of the palace, are what make this situation truly disturbing. Kate's journey through this crisis is one of courage, heartbreak, and moral complexity. It's a story that challenges perceptions of what it means to be royal, to be a partner, and to be human in the most scrutinized family on earth. As we begin to unravel this story, consider this. Every revelation, every tear, every secret meeting, and every heart-wrenching decision has led to a moment that the world is only beginning to understand. The Duchess of Cambridge is facing a challenge that few could endure, and the consequences of her actions will reverberate far beyond the palace walls. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started in the quietest way possible. A call, a message, a knock on a door that changed everything. No fanfare, no warning, just an undeniable, heart-stopping truth. Prince William's health had taken a turn that no one could ignore. Imagine receiving news like that about the person who is not only your partner, but the father of your children, your confidant, your teammate through life's most public moments. How do you process that in a world where every glance, every gesture, is dissected by millions? Kate's initial reaction was shock. Pure, raw shock that temporarily froze her into silence. The Duchess of Cambridge, whose life has been a continuous exercise in poise and composure, felt her world tilt on its axis. She knew, almost instinctively, that nothing would ever be the same again. And yet, she had to respond. Because in the royal world, hesitation can be seen as weakness. The cameras, the staff, the advisors, they were all waiting for her next move, unaware of the storm raging inside her. The moment was private, yet somehow monumental. It wasn't just a health scare. It was a revelation that cast a long shadow over their family, their children, and the very monarchy itself. Kate had to navigate not just the emotional weight of the news, but also the logistical reality, scheduling doctors, adjusting engagements, maintaining appearances, and most importantly, supporting William in a way that was both compassionate and strategically sound. Think about that for a moment. How do you comfort someone whose life has been suddenly upended while also preparing to show the world that you are still in control? Kate had no choice but to compartmentalize, to split her attention between private grief and public responsibility. Every second was measured, every expression calculated. But inside, chaos reigned. Her thoughts raced. What if this diagnosis worsens? What if it changes everything about our family, our future, our children? The questions multiplied, each one heavier than the last. And yet, the Duchess had always been remarkable under pressure. From her earliest days in the royal spotlight, she had learned to navigate expectations that would have crushed most people. She knew how to smile through pain, how to maintain dignity under scrutiny, and how to prioritize what truly mattered while ignoring the distractions of a relentless public eye. But this was different. There was no playbook for a diagnosis that could alter the course of a future king's life. There were no guidelines, no rehearsals, no training for such a profoundly personal and destabilizing event. Within hours of the news, Kate found herself at the center of a whirlwind. Advisors, doctors, aides, they all arrived with urgency, each carrying advice, opinions, and protocols. Some offered comfort, others delivered cold, clinical instructions. Kate absorbed it all, filtering through the noise, trying to find clarity in a situation that felt increasingly incomprehensible. Every choice had consequence. Every conversation was a potential pivot point in what was rapidly becoming a crisis with global ramifications. But even as she navigated the logistics, the emotional toll was relentless. Kate had to face the haunting question: how much of her private grief should be visible to William, to their children, to the world? Too much emotion, and she risked creating panic. Too little, and she risked appearing detached or uncaring. The balance was delicate, almost impossible, and yet she had to find it. Every interaction with William became a test, every word, a potential comfort or a source of additional pain. It wasn't just Kate who was affected. William himself was grappling with the enormity of the diagnosis. The man who had always been a symbol of stability, strength, and stoic composure now faced his own vulnerability, his mortality, and the fear of what this could mean for his life, his family, and his legacy. Kate had to be the anchor, the calm in the storm, while simultaneously processing her own shock. The irony was cruel. The person you lean on most must become the one to hold you up, even when they are falling themselves. The children, though shielded as best as possible, began to feel the tension. Small observations, fleeting moments of anxiety, whispered conversations, they picked up on the shift in atmosphere. Kate had to protect them, to preserve their sense of normalcy, while managing a crisis that threatened to unravel every carefully constructed routine. Every bedtime story, every playful gesture, every family outing carried an underlying tension, a hidden weight that the children could sense even if they couldn't articulate it. And then there was the public eye. Kate and William's lives are not just private, they are global property, endlessly analyzed and critiqued. Within minutes of the diagnosis, speculation ran rampant. Headlines hinted at tragedy. Social media exploded with theories, conjectures, and speculation. Every move they made would be scrutinized, every appearance dissected for signs of weakness or strain. Kate had to consider not only how to manage her husband's health, but also how to maintain the public image of strength and stability that the monarchy demands. The Duchess quickly realized that communication was key. She had to be present, patient, and perceptive. Each conversation with William had to balance honesty with reassurance. Every interaction with advisors had to be deliberate, every decision intentional. Kate had to act as both shield and mediator, protecting William from unnecessary stress while ensuring that the palace functioned as a cohesive, controlled unit. It was an impossible task, and yet she undertook it with the same dedication and poise that had defined her life in the royal spotlight. Yet, even amidst the crisis, there were contradictions. Moments of levity emerged, fleeting glimpses of normalcy that reminded Kate, and everyone around her, that life does not pause for tragedy. A shared laugh, a quiet smile, a tender touch. They were small yet profound reminders of humanity, of love, and of resilience. And they made the contrast all the more acute. The same hands that shared laughter also trembled with fear. The same voice that whispered reassurance also carried hidden anguish. As the hours stretched into days, Kate's mental and emotional endurance were tested in ways few could imagine. She had to make rapid decisions with limited information, balance competing priorities, and constantly evaluate the needs of multiple stakeholders, all while managing her own internal crisis. It was a test of intellect, empathy, and strategic thinking. Every choice had the potential to ripple outward, affecting not just her family, but the institution she represented. And yet, in the midst of this chaos, Kate found moments of clarity. She began to understand that her role was not simply to manage the crisis, but to redefine what it meant to be a duchess, a partner, and a mother under extraordinary circumstances. Her strength was not in perfection, but in perseverance. Her courage was not in the absence of fear, but in the ability to move forward despite it. She realized that in order to protect her family and the monarchy, she would have to confront her own vulnerability head-on, embracing it as a source of power rather than weakness. But even as Kate found resolve, the situation remained volatile. Every phone call, every medical update, every whispered conversation carried the potential to shift the narrative dramatically. Advisors debated course of action. Medical opinions differed. Public perception fluctuated with every news cycle. Kate was caught in the center, balancing personal grief with institutional responsibility, all while navigating the unpredictable dynamics of a family under pressure. And then, just when she thought she had a measure of control, a new piece of information arrived, something that would upend everything she thought she knew about the diagnosis. A detail that was overlooked, a subtle nuance in the medical report, a warning buried in bureaucratic language, something that changed the stakes entirely. Kate realized, with a chill that ran from head to toe, that the story was far from over. The challenges she and William faced were only beginning, and the next chapter would demand even more courage, strategy, and resilience. Every decision from this point forward would carry weighty consequences. Every word spoken, every action taken, would ripple outward in ways that could not be predicted. Kate was no longer just a supportive spouse. She had become the fulcrum on which the family's fate balanced. And as she prepared to confront the next obstacle, the Duchess understood one stark, inescapable truth. Nothing would ever be the same again. But what came next would test not only her strength, but the very fabric of the family she had fought so hard to protect. And no one, not even Kate herself, saw it coming. Kate Middleton had always been known for her poise. To the public, she was a model of grace, a royal who could smile under pressure, wave with perfection, and appear serene even amid intense scrutiny. But behind the carefully constructed image, the Duchess was facing a personal storm that few could imagine, and fewer still would ever see. This was not just a crisis about appearances. It was about her heart, her family, and the relentless weight of responsibility pressing down from every direction. Imagine being Kate in those first days after the diagnosis. Every morning began with a new calculation: how to balance care for William with the demands of public life, how to protect her children from the creeping tension, and how to maintain composure under a microscope that never blinked. Even the smallest slip, a tear, a tremor, a falter in her smile, could be photographed, analyzed, and broadcast to millions. Every step had to be measured, and yet, internally, she was unraveling. The secret struggle was more than just emotional. It was physical. Sleepless nights became the norm. Thoughts raced continuously. What if the diagnosis worsens? What if the children sense our anxiety? Are we strong enough to face this together? The Duchess found herself pacing rooms, rereading medical notes she barely understood, and replaying every past decision in her head, wondering if anything had contributed to this moment. It was exhausting, isolating, and relentless. And the paradox was cruel. In public, Kate was expected to be unflappable. She had to attend charity events, greet crowds, and uphold the royal image. The world expected her to smile, to speak with confidence, and to radiate reassurance. Behind closed doors, however, she was terrified. Every laugh felt false. Every interaction carried a hidden calculation. Even her closest aides noticed subtle changes. How she lingered on certain words, the pauses in conversation, the tiny furrow in her brow that betrayed worry. It wasn't just William's health that weighed on her. Kate had to think of the future. The children, their security, the stability of the monarchy. All of it depended on decisions she never imagined having to make. How do you explain a parent's potential vulnerability to children without instilling fear? How do you maintain normalcy when your own world feels like it is crumbling? She began to develop strategies that were both protective and subtle, crafting routines to reassure the children while shielding them from the harsh reality that lurked just beyond the walls of the palace. Even the simplest moments became exercises in tension management. Morning breakfasts were quiet, measured, filled with deliberate attempts to appear casual. A smile here, a comforting hand there, small gestures carefully calibrated to maintain calm. And yet, the undercurrent of fear was always present. Kate's mind never rested. Every phone call, every note from advisors, every medical update was absorbed with relentless intensity. Her own needs, her own fatigue, were secondary, almost invisible in the face of the enormity of what she was trying to manage. The struggle was compounded by the constant presence of the public eye. Royal life does not allow private grief. Every expression is evaluated, every word examined. Kate's private moments became arenas of scrutiny, and she learned quickly that vulnerability had to be hidden, even when it felt like the only honest response. There were nights when she wanted to cry openly, to let the tension out, to scream in frustration, but she couldn't. Doing so would have consequences beyond her own well-being. It would ripple outward to William, the children, and the perception of the monarchy itself. But Kate's resilience was extraordinary. She discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known existed. Even when fear gripped her, she found ways to act decisively, to hold herself together, and to provide calm where chaos threatened. Her secret struggle was not weakness. It was endurance, strategy, and emotional intelligence taken to their extreme. She was not just surviving this crisis. She was navigating it with a level of precision and care that few could appreciate. Yet, the emotional toll was relentless. Even as she appeared composed, Kate experienced intense fluctuations, moments of panic, anger, frustration, and profound sadness. The isolation was suffocating. Friends and family could offer comfort, but few truly understood the pressure she faced, the impossibility of balancing personal grief with the requirements of a public life defined by image, duty, and expectation. Even William, for all his strength, could not shield her from the internal burden she carried. The Duchess found herself employing coping mechanisms that were invisible but powerful. Meditation, long walks, and private reflection became lifelines. She sought brief moments of solitude where she could process the fear without the weight of expectation pressing in. She scribbled notes, rehearsed conversations, and mentally prepared for scenarios that might never come to pass. Every moment became a mental chess match, each move calculated to protect her family while preserving her own emotional stability. And yet, contradictions persisted. Kate had to be strong in ways that sometimes clashed with her own instincts. Showing too much strength risked alienating William or appearing detached. Showing too much vulnerability risked panic, both personally and publicly. Every emotion had to be calibrated, every reaction measured. It was exhausting, but it was also necessary. The stakes were simply too high for anything less than perfection, even if perfection was an illusion. Her private struggle also revealed the complexity of her relationship with William. They had always been partners in life, sharing challenges with openness and trust. But this diagnosis created a new dynamic. Kate became not just a partner, but a caretaker, strategist, and emotional anchor. She had to manage not only her own feelings, but also anticipate William's needs, fears, and responses. It was a delicate dance of empathy, support, and foresight, an ongoing negotiation that demanded every ounce of her energy and attention. At times, Kate's internal monologue was dominated by guilt. Could she have prevented this? Did she notice warning signs too late? Should she have acted differently? The human brain has a way of assigning blame, even in situations where no blame exists. Kate wrestled with these questions quietly, privately, and relentlessly. The palace staff saw only the polished exterior. No one could witness the emotional storms that raged beneath her calm exterior. And then there were the practical pressures. Decisions about medical appointments, schedules, public appearances, and family routines became battles of logistics. Every choice was scrutinized, not only for what it meant for William's health, but also for how it would be perceived by the public and the press. Kate had to balance compassion with strategy, ensuring that every action supported both the family's well-being and the monarchy's image. Even minor missteps could have enormous consequences. But perhaps the most harrowing aspect of Kate's secret struggle was the isolation. She had people around her, aides, advisors, and friends, but no one could truly experience the burden she carried. The fear, the uncertainty, the constant balancing act, these were uniquely hers. And yet, she refused to let that isolation break her. She drew on inner reserves, practiced silent rituals of strength, and embraced the role of silent warrior, a protector whose sacrifices were invisible but profound. In some moments, Kate allowed herself brief flashes of vulnerability. A tear behind closed doors, a whispered confession to a trusted confidant, or a long moment of staring out a window at a world that seemed oblivious to her struggle. These moments were fleeting, but they were vital, a release valve for the pressure that otherwise threatened to overwhelm her. She was human, after all, and even the strongest of us need moments to acknowledge fear, grief, and uncertainty. And yet, in the midst of all this, Kate never wavered in her commitment to William. Every choice, every gesture, every decision was made with his well-being at the forefront. She became a mirror of his needs, a steadying force when he faltered, a source of comfort when the world seemed unrelenting. But even as she held him up, the question lingered. Who was holding Kate? Who could bear witness to the depth of her private struggle, the magnitude of the emotional burden she carried alone? As the days turned into weeks, the pattern solidified. Kate's secret struggle became a silent rhythm in the palace, a mixture of fear, strategy, endurance, and hope. She was navigating uncharted territory, balancing the impossible. And all the while, the public remained largely unaware. They saw smiles, appearances, and moments of apparent composure. But the real story, the tension, the fear, the relentless emotional labor, remained hidden behind palace walls. It is easy to admire Kate for her resilience, but it is equally important to understand the cost. The weight of responsibility, the pressure of expectation, and the isolation of leadership in a family under scrutiny exacted a profound toll. And yet, she persisted. She adapted. She endured. And in doing so, she revealed a strength that few could comprehend, even as she privately grappled with doubt, fear, and uncertainty. But even in her determination, the challenge was far from over. Hidden threats, unexpected complications, and the relentless passage of time meant that Kate's secret struggle was only beginning. The Duchess would be tested in ways that went beyond endurance, resilience, and strategy. She would face moments that demanded courage, deception, and sacrifice in equal measure. And in the shadows of this unfolding drama, one truth loomed larger than all else. The world was about to see only the surface of a struggle that was far more profound and far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. And then came the first sign that the situation was even more complicated than she had realized. A detail, small yet profound, that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her role, her marriage, and her ability to protect her family. The moment of revelation was coming, and no one, not even Kate herself, was fully prepared for what it would reveal. Kate Middleton had always been the embodiment of poise, grace, and precision. Every public appearance, every gesture, every word carefully curated and calculated to maintain the royal image. But what happens when life's most intimate pain collides with the unyielding expectations of protocol? When personal anguish doesn't pause for ceremonial schedules, official photographs, or the scrutiny of millions of eyes worldwide? For Kate, this was no longer hypothetical. It was reality, and it was relentless. From the moment of Prince William's diagnosis, the Duchess was caught in a relentless tug-of-war. The internal pull of fear, grief, and helplessness versus the external demand to maintain perfection, dignity, and composure at all times. Imagine standing on a grand stage, 1,000 eyes on you, cameras flashing, while your heart is fractured, your mind spinning, and your soul begging for even a moment of reprieve. This was the impossible dance Kate had to perform every day. Royal protocol is not just tradition. It is a set of rules designed to protect the monarchy's image, to maintain an aura of stability, and to project control in the face of uncertainty. Every bow, every handshake, every smile is prescribed. But protocol does not accommodate tragedy. It does not comfort, it does not console, and it certainly does not allow for grief. Kate had to reconcile the stark reality of her personal life with these rigid expectations. Every choice carried weight, and every misstep could be amplified into scandal. The Duchess quickly realized that adhering strictly to protocol was both necessary and painful. The public appearances were non-negotiable. Charity events, formal engagements, even ceremonial duties, she had to attend them all, fully composed, fully present, fully convincing. Yet behind the carefully rehearsed smile, she felt the pull of her personal pain, the urge to retreat into privacy, to cry, to scream, to collapse into William's arms without concern for the world's gaze. Every minute she spent under the public eye felt like a betrayal of her own emotions. Yet every step she took in private reinforced her role as the steadfast figure holding her family together. The contradictions were stark and relentless. How could she be both vulnerable and strong? How could she grieve privately while projecting unwavering stability? Kate learned quickly that these dual demands were not mutually exclusive but deeply intertwined. To show weakness publicly was dangerous. To suppress pain entirely was unsustainable. She had to navigate a delicate equilibrium, a razor's edge where personal integrity and public expectation collided in ways that tested her very humanity. One evening, during a high-profile charity gala, the tension became almost unbearable. Cameras captured her every move, and every audience member, every dignitary, every press photographer was silently judging. Kate smiled, nodded, and engaged with poise, but inside, her mind was racing. How could she sustain this composure when the man she loved was facing a potentially devastating illness? How could she navigate these formalities while her private world threatened to unravel? Each handshake felt like a small act of defiance against her own anguish, each forced laugh a quiet rebellion against the circumstances she had not chosen. And yet, protocol demanded more. Kate was reminded constantly of the larger narrative, the monarchy's image, public perception, and the need for appearances of unity and strength. Every engagement, every photograph, every public statement was a calculated measure in a broader strategy. Any deviation could be interpreted as weakness, instability, or worse, fracture within the royal family. Kate had to internalize these imperatives even as her personal world collapsed, mastering a performance of strength that left no room for human error. The stakes were heightened by the relentless presence of the press. Headlines and rumors, speculative and sensational, circled like predators. Every misstep, every hint of emotion, every subtle flicker of vulnerability could be broadcast as evidence of royal fragility. Kate was acutely aware that protocol was her shield, but even shields have cracks. And every crack risked exposure of her deepest fears, her private struggles, and the precarious reality of her family's situation. Even within the palace walls, the pressure was suffocating. Advisors and aides provided guidance, reminders, and instructions, but they were not her confidants. They could help her navigate logistics, but they could not absorb her emotional turmoil. Kate carried the private weight of grief, fear, and anxiety, even as she executed public duties flawlessly. The dichotomy between private despair and public performance became the defining tension of her days. Kate's struggle was compounded by the unrelenting scrutiny of her peers and extended family. Royal gatherings, whether formal or informal, became complex negotiations of emotion and image. How much vulnerability could she show to William's siblings, his parents, or her own family? How much honesty could she reveal without risking judgment or concern that could spill into the public domain? Every conversation, every interaction, became a careful calculation of loyalty, trust, and potential repercussions. Even private moments offered no true refuge. The palace, while grand, is a gilded cage. The walls, though thick, cannot keep the world out. Staff, aides, and advisors are present, always observing, documenting, and reporting. And though Kate had loyal confidants, the intimate spaces where she could let down her guard were few and fleeting. Each moment of privacy was precious and vulnerable, a rare opportunity to process grief, plan strategy, or simply breathe. But even in these moments, the weight of expectation lingered, a shadow that reminded her that every choice mattered, every emotion had consequence. The Duchess's internal conflict extended to William as well. He was both a source of strength and a reflection of her own anxieties. Their interactions were layered with unspoken understanding, subtle gestures, and carefully managed communication. Kate had to anticipate not only his needs, but also his responses, moods, and moments of vulnerability. It was an emotional choreography that required intuition, empathy, and unerring attention to detail. One misstep could exacerbate tension, erode trust, or signal weakness to the outside world. And yet, the pain was unavoidable. Kate felt it in every moment of solitude. The quiet mornings before the world awoke, the long walks in palace gardens when she could think without being observed, the late nights when she scribbled notes, contemplated decisions, and wrestled with fear. These were the moments when reality hit hardest. The diagnosis was not just a news story. It was a profound personal crisis, a test of endurance, and a relentless reminder of life's fragility. The paradox of royal life is that public duty often comes at the expense of personal needs. Kate, in her private struggle, became acutely aware of this truth. Her grief, anxiety, and fear were secondary to the image she had to project, the responsibilities she had to shoulder, and the expectations she could never fully escape. It was a lesson in endurance that few outside the palace could understand. The weight she bore was both invisible and immense, a private battle fought under public scrutiny. Despite the immense pressure, Kate found ways to assert control. She established routines that allowed her to maintain composure, safeguard her family, and navigate the demands of protocol. She refined her ability to read the moods of those around her, anticipate potential disruptions, and intervene before crises escalated. She became a master of emotional strategy, balancing compassion, strength, and discretion in ways that preserved both family stability and public image. Yet the human heart is not so easily mastered. Moments of doubt, fear, and frustration intruded, often when least expected. A misplaced word, a lingering memory, a sudden thought of potential loss. Each threatened to break the carefully maintained facade. Kate had to confront these intrusions, acknowledge them privately, and continue forward, all while the world watched, none the wiser. Even as she adapted to this new reality, Kate sensed that the diagnosis was only the beginning of a far more complicated struggle. The collision of personal pain and royal duty was not a temporary challenge. It was an ongoing test, one that would demand increasing resilience, ingenuity, and courage. Every day brought new trials, unforeseen obstacles, and subtle reminders that even a duchess cannot escape the weight of expectation. And then, just when she thought she could manage the balance, an unexpected complication arose. A miscommunication, a leaked comment, or perhaps an oversight. It was enough to threaten the delicate equilibrium she had painstakingly maintained. Kate realized, with a sinking sense of urgency, that the intersection of protocol and personal pain was more treacherous than she had imagined. One wrong move could unravel everything, exposing vulnerabilities to the world that she had fought so hard to conceal. The stage was set for a confrontation between duty and desire, between the expectations of a monarchy and the demands of the human heart. Kate's next moves would not only determine her own emotional well-being, but could also have repercussions for William, their children, and the institution they represented. The tension was building, the stakes were higher than ever, and the next chapter of this story promised revelations that would challenge everything Kate thought she knew about love, loyalty, and sacrifice. And then came the moment that would force her to make an impossible choice. A choice between protocol and personal pain, between duty and the raw truth of her own heart. The palace was never truly silent. Even in the quietest corridors, whispers traveled faster than any official announcement. Some were harmless, speculations about schedules, engagements, or minor disagreements, but others carried weight. Secrets, warnings, and subtle manipulations coursed through the halls like invisible currents, shaping decisions, influencing perceptions, and quietly dictating the rhythm of life behind the gilded walls. For Kate Middleton, these whispers were more than background noise. They were the pulse of a world she now had no choice but to navigate. It started with small murmurs, barely audible, almost easy to dismiss. A comment from an aide here, a careful observation from a senior advisor there. But over time, Kate realized that the whispers were not idle chatter. They were signals, hints at tensions and alliances she had not fully understood. Every phrase carried layers of meaning. Every look, every pause, every half-spoken sentence became a puzzle she had to solve. In a family where appearances were paramount, whispers could be louder than shouts, more dangerous than overt confrontation. One afternoon, Kate was walking down a familiar hallway when a subtle exchange caught her attention. Two staff members, speaking in hushed tones, glanced quickly in her direction before lowering their voices. The words were barely discernible, but the implication was clear. Someone within the palace had knowledge of details about William's condition that had not been formally shared. The thought alone sent a chill through her. Who could it be? And what did they intend to do with this information? Kate knew she had to act, but the strategy required finesse. Confrontation could backfire. A misstep could expose not only her own vulnerabilities, but also the private struggles of her husband and children. The whispers were dangerous because they had power, the power to undermine, to manipulate, and to reshape narratives before she could even intervene. She needed to identify the source without drawing attention, to understand motives without creating enemies, and to protect her family without signaling fear. The emotional toll of this constant vigilance was immense. Kate felt a gnawing anxiety every time she stepped into a room, aware that even casual conversation could be overheard, misconstrued, or used strategically. Trust became a precious commodity, rationed carefully and extended sparingly. She began to notice subtle shifts in behavior. An advisor lingering too long in her presence, a sibling watching her interactions with William, a seemingly innocuous remark carrying hidden implications. In the world of royal whispers, nothing was random. Everything mattered. At the same time, Kate had to maintain her public composure. Every smile, every greeting, every handshake was meticulously calculated to project stability. Behind the cameras, however, she carried the weight of knowledge that the palace itself could be a source of stress, secrecy, and manipulation. The duality was exhausting. The public duchess radiating calm, while the private Kate read every subtle interaction like a puzzle that could alter the course of events. The whispers were not always malicious. Some were warnings, some were guidance, some were subtle hints of what lay ahead. Kate learned to discern tone, timing, and context, to separate helpful advice from hidden agendas. She became a student of the palace itself, its routines, its hierarchies, its unspoken rules. Every step she took was both a navigation of physical space and a careful movement through the emotional and political landscape. But not all whispers were benign. Some hinted at conflict, at jealousy, at resentment that had been simmering for years. Royal life is not immune to intrigue. In fact, it amplifies it. Long-standing rivalries, subtle alliances, and quiet tensions often play out behind closed doors, invisible to the public eye. Kate quickly realized that the palace was a battleground of subtleties. Misreading a whisper could be costly. Ignoring it could be catastrophic. She needed to understand not just the words, but the intentions behind them. The most unsettling whispers, however, concerned the diagnosis itself. Details that were meant to remain private had begun to circulate in small, controlled ways. Some advisors questioned timing. Some staff speculated about public appearances. Some whispers hinted at broader consequences for the monarchy. Kate was forced to confront a harsh reality. Even within her own household, information was not entirely secure. Trust, she realized, had to be continuously earned and carefully monitored. The psychological impact was significant. Kate's mind was in a constant state of alert. Every meeting, every interaction, every exchange of words had potential consequences. She found herself analyzing conversations long after they ended, replaying phrases in her head, searching for clues that might reveal intentions, allegiances, or potential threats. The palace had become a labyrinth of subtle signals, and navigating it required both intellect and instinct. Amid this tension, Kate's emotional resilience was tested. The whispers introduced doubt, uncertainty, and fear. Could she trust those around her? Were some allies secretly working against her? Were private details about William's health being leveraged for influence? The stakes were enormous, and the answers were elusive. Each whisper was a fragment of a larger puzzle, and Kate had to assemble the pieces without revealing her own position, without showing fear, and without compromising the delicate balance of the household. The emotional spikes were unavoidable. Moments of anger, frustration, and betrayal flared up unpredictably. She felt isolated, even among those she had once considered confidants. Sleep was restless. The weight of vigilance was exhausting. Yet, in the midst of it all, Kate demonstrated extraordinary self-control. She understood that reaction without strategy could be disastrous. Every emotional response had to be measured, every expression controlled, and every decision intentional. And yet, the whispers were relentless. Even the smallest slip, a sigh, a glance, a pause, could be interpreted as weakness. Kate knew that the stakes were not merely personal. Every rumor, every subtle revelation, had the potential to ripple outward, influencing public perception, media narratives, and even the delicate structure of the monarchy itself. The palace, she realized, was as much a psychological battlefield as it was a residence. Despite the pressure, Kate found ways to turn the whispers to her advantage. She learned to anticipate shifts in alliances, to gauge intentions through subtle cues, and to respond strategically rather than reactively. The palace became both a classroom and a testing ground. Each day was a lesson in diplomacy, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking. She became adept at reading silence as much as speech, understanding that what was left unsaid often carried the greatest significance. And yet, the most disturbing whispers were those that hinted at betrayal. Not overt, not public, but quiet, insidious, and strategically timed. Kate realized that some members of the royal household might prioritize personal or political interests over loyalty to her family. The thought was chilling. Could she protect William and the children from internal threats? Could she maintain stability while navigating a network of hidden agendas, subtle manipulations, and strategic omissions? The weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders like never before. Even amidst this uncertainty, Kate maintained a level of grace that seemed almost superhuman. She continued to attend events, host meetings, and engage with staff, all while processing an undercurrent of tension that threatened to overwhelm her at any moment. The whispers reminded her constantly that visibility does not equate to control, that power is only as secure as the alliances it depends upon, and that the palace, despite its grandeur, could be as treacherous as it was beautiful. But the most dangerous whisper of all was the one that Kate could not yet identify. A voice, faint and subtle, hinting at a revelation that would change everything. It was not malicious in tone, but it carried weight. Something hidden, something critical, something that, if discovered too late, could disrupt the careful equilibrium she had fought so hard to maintain. The palace was speaking in riddles, and Kate knew that the next revelation, the next whispered secret, could redefine everything she thought she knew about her husband's diagnosis, the family, and even her own role within the monarchy. And then, just as she began to piece together the pattern of whispers, she received information that confirmed her worst fears. Not all whispers were innocent. Not all information was benign. Some secrets were dangerous, deliberately placed, and strategically timed. Kate realized with dawning clarity that the palace itself had become a chessboard, and she was both player and target. The tension escalated. Every conversation, every glance, every interaction became a test. Trust had to be earned repeatedly. Loyalty could not be assumed. And as the shadows of whispers lengthened, Kate understood that the next move, her next move, would be critical. One misstep could expose not only personal vulnerabilities, but also the fragile structures she was tasked with protecting. The palace, with all its history, grandeur, and tradition, had become a maze of hidden messages and unspoken tensions. Kate's journey through it was both literal and symbolic, navigating hallways, hidden corridors, and private chambers, while simultaneously navigating alliances, power dynamics, and human emotions that were as subtle as they were powerful. And just when she thought she had deciphered enough, a whisper reached her that chilled her to the core, a hint of a secret so profound that it threatened to undo everything she had carefully managed. Someone, somewhere within the palace, held knowledge that could change the trajectory of her family's future. And it was only a matter of time before it surfaced. The Duchess understood in that instant. Her private struggle was no longer just about William's diagnosis or her own grief. It had become a high-stakes game of strategy, perception, and survival. Every word, every action, every carefully guarded emotion mattered. And the next revelation, the one hidden in the shadows of the palace whispers, was about to change everything. In the world Kate Middleton inhabited, trust was both invaluable and precarious. The palace was a complex ecosystem of alliances, loyalties, and unspoken hierarchies. Some people were allies in the truest sense, willing to protect and support her in every circumstance. Others, however, operated with subtle agendas, their intentions hidden behind smiles, courteous bows, and seemingly innocuous advice. Navigating this web of relationships became as critical as managing her husband's diagnosis itself. Kate had learned quickly that appearances could be deceiving. A warm smile or gentle tone did not always signify goodwill. A kind word in the hallway might carry hidden intentions. She became hyper-aware of nuance, watching body language, analyzing phrasing, and discerning patterns that could reveal motives. Even a fleeting glance could signal alliance or opposition, and missing a subtle cue could have dire consequences for both her family and the monarchy. Her inner circle of confidants was small but vital. These were individuals she could rely on without hesitation, people whose loyalty had been tested under pressure. They offered guidance, emotional support, and a discreet sounding board for her most private fears. In a palace where whispers carried power, these confidants became her lifeline. Individuals who could help her parse truth from deception and help navigate both the personal and political minefields surrounding her. Yet, even among trusted allies, caution was essential. Kate had learned to compartmentalize. She shared only what was necessary, even with those she trusted implicitly. Every conversation was deliberate, every disclosure calculated. Revealing too much could backfire, even unintentionally. In a household filled with ambition, history, and complex human dynamics, information was a currency, and Kate had to manage it with precision. The Duchess also had to contend with hidden adversaries. Those who presented themselves as friends, but carried motives that were not immediately obvious. Perhaps they were motivated by ambition, jealousy, or loyalty to others whose priorities conflicted with hers. Perhaps they saw the diagnosis as an opportunity to assert influence or shift power. Kate became acutely aware that subtle manipulation could come from unexpected quarters, and even seemingly benign interactions required vigilance. At the same time, Kate's empathy became both a strength and a vulnerability. She instinctively wanted to understand people, to anticipate their needs, and to build bridges even in tense situations. But in an environment where information is power, empathy could be exploited. The Duchess had to refine her instincts, learning to distinguish genuine concern from strategic positioning, to sense when an offer of support was sincere and when it concealed an ulterior motive. The emotional load of this constant assessment was immense. Kate had to be alert to every nuance, while simultaneously managing her personal grief, supporting William, and protecting the children. Mental exhaustion was inevitable. Sleep became fitful. Moments of quiet reflection were rare, stolen in brief intervals that allowed her to regroup. The palace, once a symbol of heritage and stability, had become a pressure cooker of human emotion, where every interaction carried both opportunity and risk. Yet, in the midst of these challenges, Kate found a source of quiet strength in her hidden confidants. They offered guidance, reassurance, and perspective when she most needed it. These allies helped her navigate sensitive conversations with advisors, mediate tensions with extended family members, and even anticipate potential crises before they arose. Their presence reinforced the reality that even in isolation, one could find support and clarity, if careful and discerning in whom to trust. The complexity of these relationships became particularly evident during private family meetings. Kate had to balance multiple perspectives while preserving the emotional and strategic cohesion of the family unit. Decisions were not made lightly. Every choice, regarding medical care, public appearances, or internal communication, carried implications that extended far beyond immediate circumstances. Allies helped her weigh options, anticipate outcomes, and strategize in ways that maintained both family unity and the integrity of the monarchy. Kate's ability to manage friends, foes, and confidants also required intuition. She needed to sense tension before it escalated, detect deception before it caused harm, and navigate alliances without creating unnecessary friction. Each day brought a new challenge, a subtle shift in dynamics, or an unexpected piece of information that required careful consideration. The mental load was continuous, demanding focus, patience, and an almost preternatural awareness of human behavior. And yet, the Duchess maintained a remarkable composure. To the outside world, she appeared calm, collected, and unwavering. Few could grasp the internal calculations, emotional swings, and private strategies that allowed her to sustain this public image. This ability to project stability while managing complexity behind the scenes became one of her most powerful tools, a mechanism that preserved both her family and her role within the monarchy. The stakes of these interpersonal dynamics were magnified by the diagnosis. William's condition added urgency and gravity to every relationship. Allies could support her more effectively, but adversaries could exploit vulnerabilities with devastating effect. Kate understood that every conversation, every disclosure, and every interaction was magnified by the reality of the situation. She could not afford error, misjudgment, or misalignment. Lives and legacies were on the line. The Duchess also discovered that hidden confidants could serve as unexpected protectors. A seemingly minor gesture, a discreet warning, or a subtle intervention could avert disaster. These individuals became her invisible shields, working quietly behind the scenes to safeguard the family and manage potential crises before they erupted publicly. Kate relied on them not only for practical advice, but also for emotional support. A reminder that even in isolation, loyalty and courage could be found in unexpected places. Yet the most challenging aspect was discerning who was truly trustworthy. The palace was filled with people who understood the stakes, who observed patterns, and who weighed risks and rewards in every interaction. Kate had to anticipate manipulation without assuming malice, navigate alliances without creating enemies, and preserve discretion in every disclosure. The line between friend and foe was never entirely clear, and she quickly realized that vigilance had to be constant. The emotional stakes were heightened by personal vulnerability. Kate's role as confidant and strategist came at the cost of her own emotional release. She could share fears strategically, but the depth of her internal struggle remained largely unseen. Even in moments of private reflection, she measured the intensity of her emotions, guarding against any sign that might compromise her position, her family's security, or her public image. Despite these pressures, Kate found moments of clarity and empowerment. The hidden confidants allowed her to test ideas, explore strategies, and consider consequences without immediate risk. Their presence reminded her that even in a world dominated by protocol, appearances, and power dynamics, alliances grounded in loyalty, integrity, and shared purpose could exist. These relationships became her anchor, providing stability amid uncertainty and guidance when the path forward was unclear. But the palace was a living, breathing organism, and secrets had a way of surfacing when least expected. Whispers, rumors, and subtle manipulations continued to circulate. Kate had to anticipate not only the intentions of others, but also the potential outcomes of her own actions. Every disclosure, every private conversation, every strategic move had the potential to shift the balance of trust, power, and influence. And then came a revelation that would test the limits of Kate's judgment. A trusted confidant revealed information about William's condition, details that had been deliberately withheld from her. It was not malicious, but the implications were staggering. Decisions that she believed were fully informed were, in fact, based on incomplete understanding. And the consequences of acting, or failing to act, could be profound. Kate understood immediately that the landscape had shifted. Allies and adversaries alike could be affected. Missteps could alter family dynamics, public perception, and even the stability of the monarchy. Every calculation, every judgment, and every action moving forward would carry amplified consequences. She realized that navigating friendships, detecting foes, and relying on hidden confidence would be more critical than ever. The palace was no longer merely a